Good morning. So here we are, and we have heard some beautiful readings right now, haven't we? Have you paid close attention to what the Apostle Paul had to tell us in the second reading? He can come across as a little bit strict at times, huh? I mean, he was the apostle to the Gentiles. He had a really important mission, and he did all he could to, well, bring the good news to the people of his time. So maybe we need to put this into perspective when we talk about the second reading, when Paul tells the Ephesians, do not get drunk on wine, in which lies, is it debauchery or debauchery? Debauchery? No, debauchery. Okay. I'm not a native speaker, I don't know these things. Okay, but I'll repeat that for you. Do not get drunk on wine, in which lies debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. Now, I can almost hear some of you think, saying, now come on, Paul, lighten up a bit. I mean, what's a glass of wine or two or three, right? But let's be honest, life in the ancient city of Ephesus was probably wild enough, so that there was reason for Paul to speak this truth. Make the most of your time, because the days are evil, he tells them. Ephesus was a bustling port city, and we don't really need much imagination to think about what all was going on in that city. But let's be real for a moment. Doesn't it sound like fun to go all out once in a while? To have those glasses of wine? To eat more than we need to be filled? I mean, just think about Thanksgiving. We always eat more than we should. I do. And maybe even this summer, as you look in the mirror, after the summer is almost done, you may feel, oh, there's a little bit more weight right there. So, to eat and drink more than we should, to live without limits, that can seem quite appealing. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, Father, what are you saying? Don't lead us into temptation here. After all, isn't that one of the 7 deadly sins, overindulgence? And yes, it is, so don't get me wrong there. It's definitely something that we've been taught about to avoid. But isn't there also something very tempting about it? And let's be honest, haven't we all done it at some point? If you haven't, well, maybe you should try it. Just kidding, of course, but seriously, sometimes we only discover where our limits lie by crossing them. The thing is, when we push ourselves to the limit, we learn something very important about life. We learn what truly brings us joy. And we also learn where the boundaries of our enjoyment lie. Once we know our limits, we can live life to the fullest, savoring every moment as that which it is, a gift from God. Yes, even those moments when we push up against those limits. But here's the challenge for many of us. If we're always trying to live within the lines, we might never fully experience the richness that life presents. And on the flip side, if we've never tested our boundaries, we can be caught off guard really, really strongly when we unexpectedly cross those boundaries. The first reading today from the book of Proverbs invites us to look into this a little bit deeper. And who better could present us with the wisdom of God than a woman? Wisdom, personified as a woman here, has prepared a banquet and calls us to come and eat my food and drink of the wine I have mixed. And this isn't just a meal that we're talking about. It's an invitation to live wisely and to make good choices. But to really appreciate wisdom, we need to understand life in all its fullness, including its joys and its limits. When we embrace life with all its joys, we become more aware of our being human. We become more aware of our bodies, more aware of our desires, and more aware of the spirits at work in us. Even the ancient philosophers at the time of Paul knew about this. They understood that the goal of life was to be at peace in body and mind. At least that was the goal for their life, and nothing more. As Christians, we hear St. Paul that our lives are not just about us. We belong to God. And we're responsible to God. But this isn't a contradiction to enjoying life. I say this again. Belonging to God is not a contradiction to enjoying life. In fact, it's the opposite. When we truly enjoy life, we are really accepting God's invitation to live fully. And this brings us to the heart of today's gospel, where Jesus says, "I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever, and the bread that I will give is my flesh for the life of the world." We're called to live this life to the fullest, not just by indulging in earthly pleasures, but by participating in the life that Jesus offers us. This doesn't mean living recklessly, but it also doesn't mean being overly strict with ourselves. The key, as so often, is to find a good balance, knowing when to let loose a little and also when to practice restraint. If we lose this balance, we can end up going to the extremes, and that's not good for us or for those people who encounter us. We find our direction first and foremost by looking to God. And God's idea of a good life, a life that ultimately leads to eternal life. And we can be confident that God is with us every step of the way, because Jesus promises us, "Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me and I in him." And this promise holds true to our time. When we seek to live life in all its fullness, all that belongs to it, all the gift that we receive from God with this life, we're also able to share that life with others. But with this freedom comes responsibility. And we might wonder, well, how do I use my freedom wisely? Can I trust even myself to make the right choices? And brothers and sisters, it's good to have those questions. Those are important questions, and they're worth thinking about. Paul encourages us to be careful then how you live, not as foolish persons, but as wise. You make that decision for yourself. Where do you find yourself? On the side of the foolish or on the side of the wise? We are called to discern the will of the Lord. That's our job as Christians. And it's a serious job, one that at times may be easy and at times we may find really difficult. A good distinction is always, what are the fruits of our actions? Is this something that is beneficial to me and to others? Or is it something that brings harm? I'd like to leave you with a thought from a Jesuit priest, so not a Carmelite like myself, different group, also not bad, who was also a member of the German resistance against the Nazi regime in the Second World War, Father Alfred Delp. And he wrote these words during a very dark time when he was imprisoned, and just a few weeks before he was then killed in 1945. And he said, "Let us trust in life, because we do not have to live it alone. God lives it with us." Imagine saying those words. Those were the words that he had his fellow Jesuits smuggle out of the prison under duress, going through a really hard time, and this is what drove him. Let us trust in life, because we do not have to live it alone. God lives it with us. So, brothers and sisters, let's go out today after Mass, embracing life, trusting that God is with us in every moment, and remember, it is meant to be enjoyed, responsibly, of course.